excited to have everybody here. We want to remind you again that this meeting is being recorded. We welcome everyone to join if you are a member of Ollie. Thank you for being a member. And if you are a visitor, sorry, um, please join our website. Go to csudh.edu/Ollie and we'll put the information in the chat. And that will allow you to see all of the member benefits, all of the great classes that are coming up. All of the information is available. So today's session, again, is Exploring the Paranormal with Brian Clune. I'm going to go ahead and take my share screen down. And Brian, you have the floor whenever you're ready.
Hi, everybody. Thank you so much for joining me with this. As was mentioned, I love having conversations about this. So if you have questions, please feel free to interrupt me. Just ask away. I do a few lectures and talks at paranormal conventions and things like that. And those are fun. But when you get people who are not in the industry, shall we say, um, they're a lot more open. It seems like everybody in the paranormal community seems to think that they know everything. So half the time I get, you don't know what you're talking about, and it's just certain things like that that can drive me crazy. But for groups like this, I just love that people are interested, that they want to learn. The paranormal is not what we see on television. Um, on TV, you have guys going in and asking all of these questions, and then all of this stuff starts to happen. And a majority of the time, it's 99% boredom, with us sitting around in a room by ourselves in the dark, talking to thin air. Okay, so if you actually see what we do, you'll look at us and go, huh, these people are nuts. And half of us are, but I won't go into that. We do it for the 1% of the time when we do get a good bit of evidence. What you see on TV, like I said, isn't reality. The paranormal is a lot more rare than what the entertainment industry shows. Um, like I said, 99% of the time we get nothing. But that 1% does make it worth it. Now, I'm going to start off this series with Haunted Hollywood. Now, I'm sure there is nobody on the planet that has not heard of Hollywood, California. And there is a perception among a lot of people that Hollywood itself is this place where dreams come true, that all somebody from, say, the Midwest or, anywhere in the country, all they have to do is come to Hollywood, go into a diner, and a producer, a director is going to find them and they're going to become a big star. Unfortunately, what generally happens is completely different. Instead of Hollywood being a place where dreams come true, most of the time it's where nightmares happen. A couple cases in point. You have you guys heard of Peg Entwistle? She was an actress back in the 1930s that threw herself off of the Hollywood sign. Now, she had been trying for a very long time to make it big in Hollywood. She had already done a few stage productions and things like that. And the sad part where Peg Entwistle is concerned, she killed herself by throwing herself off of the H, if I remember correctly, was that the day after she committed suicide, she got a call that unfortunately she never heard, that she had just gotten her big break. There are Marilyn Monroe is another example. Sure, she made it big, but most people don't realize that the studios themselves had basically turned her into a drug addict. Apparently the Hollywood elite the ones making the movies, the producers, did that with a lot of actresses. And it goes back to a bit of Hollywood sexism, where they were not getting the male stars hooked on Nebutal, but they were doing it to a majority of the females, or at least trying to, which is just wrong. And then they get these actresses hooked on drugs and then blame them for the behavior that the drugs were creating. And Marilyn was a good case. A lot of people, their only view of Marilyn Monroe is this bubble-headed blonde that it was a sex symbol, and it was anything but that. She was a very intelligent woman. Most of the time, when she wasn't, hooked on the drugs, she knew exactly what she was doing. When I was writing about her in my book, Hollywood Obscura, I kind of fell in love with Norma Jean, not necessarily Marilyn Monroe, but Norma Jean herself, because she really had a bad upbringing, and it was just one of those things that was just really sad. Ramon Navarro, a person that most people have never heard of. He was actually one of Rudolph Valentino's lovers. After Valentino passed away, he became his protege, and for the longest time, he was like the big sex symbol to replace Rudolph Valentino. And he passed away. Well, actually, he was murdered, and I'll get into that in a little bit, in 1969. And then one that everybody has heard of, I'm pretty sure, is Sharon Tate. This is another case where she was an up-and-coming actress. She was married to one of the premier directors of the time, Roman Polanski, and just by being in the wrong house, she was murdered by the Manson family. So Hollywood is one of those places where it just is not what people seem. It's basically one of the facades that the movies put up. So that's something that we kind of need to understand where Hollywood is concerned, that the glitz and glamour of Tinseltown is basically tarnished. And I kind of affectionately call it tarnished Tinseltown a lot of the times. Now, Hollywood, believe it or not, would not be the Hollywood we know today without a man by the name of Carl Laemmle. Now, Carl Laemmle was an immigrant from Germany. During the both wars, actually, he fought Germany, and during World War II, he was really big in bringing Jewish people over here to try and save them. But even still, Hollywood, because he was German, treated him as a pariah. Although he was very short in stature, but he was big in every other way. Now, he actually started off in Chicago buying Nickelodeons, and he realized that the Nickelodeon was going to be this huge thing. This was before movies really took off. After he got involved with Nickelodeons, he started a little a little studio in Lee, New Jersey, and ended up having to fight Thomas Alva Edison and Eastman Kodak in court, because Edison and Kodak were monopolizing the movie industry. They were forcing people to use their cameras. The cameras were taxed every time they were turned on. The film was taxed because Kodak was the one making the film. And the Edison company, which was the Thomas Edison Trust, was actually keeping all of the actors and actresses. I don't want to use the word slave, but they were basically that to the movie studios. They were not allowed to go to any other studios. They were not allowed to do any kind of appearances or do anything that they were not granted permission from doing. And they weren't even allowed to make personal appearances, say, on Broadway. They were basically stuck with whatever theater they had originally signed with. Now, after Carl Laemmle won his lawsuit against Edison, he created what we know today as, actor and actresses contracts, which back then he called the star system, which put the actors and actresses above the studios. So they still had to sign contracts, but they could break their contract. They could ask for more money. And Laemmle would actually, depending on how big the star was, the star would get more money for being in a film. So what we know today as, the Screen Actors Guild basically started with Carl Laemmle. Now, Carl Laemmle loved making movies, and he knew that being in New Jersey during the winter and things like that, it was limited on the types of movies he could make during the winter time. So he moved his entire studio to the San Fernando Valley, and his studio later became Universal Studios. So Universal Studios at the time became the biggest studio in Hollywood. And without Universal Studios, we would not have Dracula, we would not have The Mummy, or any of the horror icons that we know and love today. It was Carl Laemmle who created those through his movies. When he first built his studio, Carl never did anything small. So he planned this huge 2-day grand opening where he had a train leave Chicago with all kinds of dignitaries, politicians, to come to Universal Studios for the opening. They named themselves Universalites, and they just had this huge 2-day event planned. Now, one of the things that Carl did during opening ceremonies is he had a pilot by the name of George Stites. And Stites at the time was one of the best aviators of his time. He was a stunt pilot, and I mean, he was just incredible. Excuse me. Now, opening day, he was supposed to do a stunt, but the wind was too fierce at the time, and they postponed it for the second day. The day that he was supposed to do it, one of his friends had crashed and died in San Francisco. So he was a little bit nervous about doing it just because he was thinking about his friend. Now, during his stunt, he was supposed to dive on another airplane that was actually on wires. He was supposed to dive down on it, strafe it. The airplane was supposed to blow up, and he was supposed to fly away victorious. Well, somebody had put too much dynamite in the dummy airplane, and when he shot it, the special effects person hit the button, blew the plane up, and it caused Stites' plane to lose control. Now, Stites, for some odd reason, instead of trying to ride the plane down and possibly land or crash land, he decided to jump out of the airplane. Not exactly the best thing you can do at about 100 feet in the air. And he ended up breaking his neck and was dead on the spot. Now, the reason I'm mentioning this is Stites is apparently the very first ghost to ever be at Universal Studios. And it was kind of amusing. Nobody really knew about Stites until one of the producers who was trying to expand Halloween Horror Nights was in the back lot, and it was by the Psycho House. Everybody knows the Psycho House, which, by the way, has been moved a couple times. It's actually not in the original site it was when it was filmed. And him and his assistant were out in the back lot, and they're kind of looking around, and they noticed this person standing there who was dressed as a old-time aviator. And they thought it was an actor that was, in a part making one of the movies nearby, but they couldn't find any cameraman or any sign of a movie going on in the area. So as they approached him, this person just disappeared. Now, the producer literally ran screaming from the location. The assistant, and I guess they were fairly good friends, was kind of laughing and walking away. I guess the assistant realized what was going on, but by the time the producer got in the next day, everybody was making fun of him from running away scared from a ghost. So when the producer decided to do some investigation to see who this person might possibly be, he came across Stites and got this idea that, well, maybe Stites just wants to be known. So he goes to the prop department, grabs a mannequin, dresses it as a old-time aviator, and places it at the area where he had seen the ghost. Stites never came back until somebody saw the mannequin there, figured it was just left for by accident, takes the mannequin away, puts everything back, and all of a sudden people on the tour start seeing this ghost wandering around in the area. Now naturally they figured it was special effects from the studio, but the tour guides and the people giving the tour knew better. When the producer found out, he went back, got the mannequin again, dressed it, put it back over there, and sure enough, no more Stites. So the mannequin, and you still might see it on the tour. It's been kind of covered up by the War of the Worlds crashed airplane, but it is still there somewhere. And every once in a while, you can catch a glimpse of this mannequin dressed as a early 1900s aviator, but they are under orders to never take it away. And I've always found that a little bit of an amusing story. Apparently, Mr. Stites just wants to be remembered. So if you're ever on the tour at Universal Studios, please, keep your eye out. Now, the studio itself has a fair amount of hauntings. I don't know how many people have heard of Soundstage 28, but this is where the original Phantom of the Opera with Lon Chaney was filmed. Now, unfortunately, the studio is no longer there, but Universal is very good about trying to keep their history from being destroyed. Now, Soundstage 28 actually had the opera house set built into the walls. So to tear the whole structure down meant to take down the opera house as well. But Universal actually very carefully removed everything from the wall. It's now stored, and they're hopefully going to put it up as a in a museum that they're thinking about building for movie history. Now, Lon Chaney, after he passed away, apparently made quite a few appearances in Soundstage 28. While making movies, strange things would happen with the cameras. Lights would turn on for no reason. Then whole electrical boards would just go dead. And one of the things that I found amusing is Ghost Whisperer used to be filmed in Soundstage 28 before it was torn down. The actors, actresses, and crew of Ghost Whisperer said that they have seen Lon Chaney many times. And one of the extras, and I'm sorry, I cannot remember the man's name, said that he actually had a conversation with Lon Chaney. Now, whether that's true or not, I don't know. But he said that Lon Chaney was giving him pointers on how to become an actual star rather than an extra. Whether that's true, who am I to say that the person didn't? Lucille Ball is actually still seen walking from the area where her dressing room used to be across to one of the sound stages. She's no longer, or I'm sorry, her dressing room is no longer there. Although as a kid, I actually remember going on the tour and they would walk us through Lucille Ball's old dressing room. But one of the ones that I find so amusing is Steven Spielberg, when he first started his Amblin Entertainment, was given Alfred Hitchcock's old office. And he actually ended up having to leave the office after a couple of years because he said Alfred Hitchcock was so busy looking over his shoulder, trying to make sure that he was doing what he was supposed to do, that he got tired of Hitchcock actually kibitzing on his movies. I always found that rather amusing. Now, the studio itself is also haunted. I'm sorry, the amusement park area, where Soundstage 28 used to be, is the Transformers ride. Now, they have actually seen Lon Chaney in that particular ride, because part of that ride is like halfway to where the soundstage used to be. The Mummy ride, for some reason, they keep seeing a child on the tracks, and they've actually had to shut the ride down because people on the ride would get off of the ride claiming that their roller coaster car had just struck and killed a child. There's another little girl in Jurassic Outfitters who apparently has become protective of the employees, and people who are actually making it harder on the employees will find things thrown at them, even though there's nobody there. And when I say thrown at them, I'm not talking, jars or anything like that, but they'll have stuffed animals thrown at them. They have little stuffed dinosaurs because it's right next to Jurassic Park ride. There is, and one of the ones that I get a kick of down there is during the Halloween Horror Nights. They will have a maze down there by the Mummy ride, and there's apparently a scare actor who passed away and will actually go and continue doing his job in the maze when they put the maze down there. And they have had actual living scare actors come up and ask who this person is because they want to be just like him. They're saying that he is so good that nobody else can even come close to the amount of fright that he can put into the guests. I would imagine might have something to do with the fact that he's deceased, but maybe not. So Universal Studios is one of those places that to me is just incredible. I mean, it has such a history. It has an amusement park that really can't be beat because of the special effects. And of all of the Universal Studio parks around the world, this is still the only one where you can still see your favorite actors and actresses while they're filming movies. Jim Carrey at one point was taking a break, and he was at the Bates Motel right by the Psycho House, and the tram pulled up, and he got this idea. He grabbed one of the plastic knives and started walking up to the tram holding this knife up, threatening them with it. And naturally, when they realized who it was, everybody was cracking up, and he stood there and actually did autographs for them and stuff. But because of that, every time the tram goes by now, they actually have an actor stand out there, pretend to be Norman Bates, attacking the tram with a knife. So if you guys decide to take a trip to a Universal Studios, keep your eye out not only in the back lot, but in the amusement park. Some of the stores are haunted there. Production Central has a mischievous ghost there. The Simpson ride is one of the most haunted rides at Universal Studios. A little girl passed away there years ago when it was actually the Back to the Future ride. And she's still seen there, and in Krusty's Corner. It's a little store outside. So, you know, and there are other studios that have a haunted reputation. Paramount Studios, which, by the way, was built on cemetery land. Now, there was never anybody buried there, but the cemetery didn't need all of that room, so they originally had leased out part of their land to Paramount Studios. The back wall of Paramount Studios butts up to Hollywood Forever Cemetery. And a lot of the security guards have stated over the years that they will actually see people walking through the wall from Hollywood Forever Cemetery into the studio. Now, for those who don't know what Hollywood Forever Cemetery is, it is one of the main cemeteries where actors and actresses are buried. You will find so many names there. Rudolph Valentino is buried there. Virginia Rappe is buried there. She's an old time actress who was killed back in the 20s, late 20s, early 30s. And Fatty Arbuckle was actually put on trial for killing her. Now, he was acquitted, but it ruined his career. Then you have, I mean, you literally have all kinds of people buried there. Bugsy Siegel is actually buried there, the mobster. And Mel Blanc, this is one of my most favorite gravestones there. Mel Blanc, he was the voice of Looney Tunes characters, and Porky Pig. On his tombstone, it just says, "That's all, folks." Just like one of his characters. So that's and it's open to the public. So if you ever want to go and just take a look, you will find some interesting gravestones there. And during the summer, they also show movies sitting on the grass. So it's kind of an interesting place. And it's haunted, by the way. I'm actually writing about that in my California's Haunted Route 66 book, because Santa Monica Boulevard is actually Route 66. And so Hollywood Forever is actually right on Route 66. Now, the studios are not the only places that have a haunted reputation. One, and I had mentioned Ramon Navarro earlier. Now, Ramon is probably the saddest story that I've ever written about. And I wrote about Mr. Navarro in my Hollywood Obscura book. Ramon, like I said, was a friend of Rudolph Valentino. There's speculation that they were lovers. And Ramon was an avowed homosexual. And one of the sad parts is back then, they just were not accepted in Hollywood. And the studios, after Ramon started to make it big, were trying to get him to marry a woman of their choice to kind of cover up the fact that he was gay, and he just wouldn't have any of it. You know, he knew exactly who he was. He was proud of who he was, and he wasn't going to change for Hollywood. And I applaud him for that. Now, the problem is, though, is because of that, parts started to get less and less. He was very private with his personal life. So, I mean, he wasn't out, bragging about being gay or anything like that. It's just, as happens, rumors started to get around. He was cast as extras in a couple Gunsmoke episodes. I believe it was in the Wild Wild West one or two times, and he did a lot of Bonanza a few times. But he never had a permanent partner, shall we say. And I think part of that might have had to do with the times. He passed away, murdered in 1969. And his murder was one of the most gruesome in a lot of ways. Ramon, like all of us, he needed companionship. And there was an escort service nearby where he lived in Hollywood. And he would call them, and they would send men over, and it wasn't always about sex with him. He just wanted companionship, somebody to talk to that understood what he was going through. And he actually became very popular with the escorts that were sent over. All of them wanted to come over because apparently he was just a very sweet man and kind to everybody. Now, the sad thing that happened, he had done a Johnny Carson show or a Tonight Show. And he was talking about how he had $5,000 stashed in his living room, or actually not stashed, but he had $5,000 in his living room is how he put it. Now, these two brothers heard him say that and got the idea to go over and pretend to be interested in him, as having a relationship. Well, when they got there, Ramon was very kind to them. He had actually contacted the escort service, and they said, yeah, we know them. And the only reason they knew the brothers was because the brothers had a friend who was one of the escorts. Now, when they showed up, Ramon had dinner for them. They were relaxing on the couch and just talking and having a good time. The older of the two brothers had asked Ramon, do you want to go in the other room? And Ramon, thinking that the man was attractive, agreed. The younger brother stayed out in the living room and started talking to his girlfriend on the phone. And all of a sudden, the younger brother started to hear a commotion in the bedroom. Now, the older brother was beating Ramon, trying to get him to tell them where he had stashed the money in the living room. And Ramon kept saying, I don't have any money stashed in the house. There's no money in the living room. And the older brother didn't believe him. The younger brother, who was still on the phone with his girlfriend back in Chicago, the girlfriend was asking what's going on. And finally, the younger brother said, I need to go and get in there before he kills him. And he hangs up. The girlfriend had no idea what he was talking about. The younger brother goes back in there, and there's Ramon on the bed, beaten literally to death. Now, this is going to be a bit gruesome, but the coroner's report stated that Ramon had been beaten so badly that even his penis was bruised. I don't even know how that's possible, but it was just horrible. The next day after they left, they never got any money. They just took a few things out of the house and left. The next day, Ramon's assistant showed up at the house and found Ramon dead in the bedroom. They did catch the two brothers by way of the girlfriend because of the phone records from the house. Now, the sad part is, and nobody has ever said that criminals were intelligent, but when they were watching the Tonight Show episode with Ramon, they apparently didn't realize that when Ramon said, I have $5,000 in the living room, that he meant he had invested $5,000 in the living room, because they had been talking about how he had upgraded his house. So there was no money. They were just not intelligent enough to realize what he had meant. Now, Ramon was, I wouldn't say a huge star, but he was a well-known star whose trial would have made national news if another murder hadn't happened just a week later, which completely threw Ramon's story right out of the news. And that was the Manson murders of Sharon Tate up on Cielo Drive. Now, a lot of people don't realize that the destruction that the Manson family left was not only psychological, but paranormal. There have been many reports of Sharon Tate, Jay Sebring, and pardon me, I've never been able to pronounce this, Wojciech Wojtkowski, and Abigail Folger at the new mansion. Now, the ranch house where the 5 people were killed, because and a lot of people don't realize that the guest house had a young man living there, and he was actually the first one murdered before they even got into Sharon Tate's house. But there have been a lot of reports of this new mansion, which, by the way, I just found out is up for sale, of them appearing there. And there is also, excuse me, a man by the name of David Oman, who lives just like 5 or 6 houses down from where the murders took place. And according to him, he has had Sharon Tate and Jay Sebring show up down there. Wojtkowski and Folger, I haven't heard him really talk about. So that whole area is apparently fairly haunted. And it's kind of interesting because if you go down from where Cielo Drive is, cross the street and go up the hill, you'll find Falcons Lair, which is where Rudolph Valentino lived. And Mr. Valentino is seen there quite often. Nobody seems to mind him being there because he's apparently just made himself part of the family. He originally lived there. So, that's not a problem. But then Gary Hinman, who was murdered before the Tate La Bianca House murders, he is seen at the area where he was murdered. Now, he was murdered because Manson wanted money from him, and he wasn't going to give them any money. And a lot of people don't realize, but yes, Manson was there at the time he was killed, and Manson actually was the one who cut his ear off. So Gary Hinman is actually seen, and it's weird. And it's kind of a paranormal tool in a way, but old TVs are sometimes put on channels that have nothing but static. And supposedly the white noise and the static will allow voices and pictures to appear on the screen. I haven't had much luck with it, but supposedly Mr. Hinman will pop up on people's TVs who live around the area where he was killed. Another area involving the Mansons come from an area called Spawn Ranch, which is out off of like the 118 freeway and the 405 out in that area. And there was a man who worked for the Spahn Ranch by the name of Shorty Shea. And Manson had him killed and had his body buried very near the ranch. They finally found his body about 3 years after he was murdered. There's also a bizarre story involving Spahn Ranch, which I don't know if it's connected to the Manson killings or not, but there is something out there that people are calling the Watcher. And you'll be driving along the road, and right when you get to the area of Spahn Ranch, a black sedan will just come speeding up behind you, come up to your bumper, and will literally tailgate you until you are past the Spahn Ranch area, at which point this car just disappears. I've driven over there a few times, hoping to see the this black sedan, but so far no luck. But you know, a lot of people look at these murders as you know, just this gruesome event that was over in 1969 or over after the trials, but unfortunately, it seems that his victims are still suffering today. Now, there was some speculation that the La Bianca house was haunted as well, and that Zach Baggins was buying it, buying the house. But because of the book, I did talk to the owners of the La Bianca house. And they were saying that no, nothing's ever happened there. I talked to the neighbors, and same thing. So, you know, a lot of times we have to be careful of stories that appear just because of certain things that happen. And that's one of the things I've found in my many years of investigating the paranormal, that there are a lot of stories told that have no basis in actual fact, but rather in folklore. So, you know, sometimes it's hard to determine which is which. But if you're in it for the entertainment, that's fine. You know, I like with my books, I always joke about the fact that yes, I will back my history 100%, my ghost stories, not so much, because the ghost stories are basically taken from what other people tell me. I do have some of my own ghost stories in the books, and I'll get into those in the next couple of sessions. We've had some interesting things happen at Alcatraz, which is what I'm going to be talking about next. And then the Queen Mary, oh my Lord, the Queen Mary, when it opens up, if you guys want to try and have your own paranormal experience, I highly recommend a night stay at the Queen Mary. So there's about 15 minutes left. Does anybody have any questions?
Sorry, you're welcome to unmute yourselves if you have any questions or want to share your own commentary about your remembrances of some of these various activities or events through history. So feel free to unmute.
Okay,
Paulette,
well,
go ahead.
if there aren't,
go ahead. Paulette's there. Go ahead, Paulette.
Oh, okay.
Has anybody ever determined? Well, thank you for your presentation. Very interesting. Why some of these people, I'm going to call them energy, you know, why they're, what is their goal in being present? Or I'm not making a connection with what they're doing or what kind of message they're trying to send
now
by these appearances.
Let's take Stites, the pilot. It seems obvious that his death was tragic, at least and more so in his eyes, naturally. And the way that the mannequin is placed near where he fell suggests that his reason for being there is that he just wants to be remembered. Back then, Mr. Stites had a very big ego. His main goal in life was to be known as the greatest aviator of all time. And he was good, but in his mind, he wasn't the greatest of all time. So as far as Mr. Stites is concerned, and of course, this is my opinion because nobody's actually talked to him, so we don't fully know, but he just wants to be remembered. And like I said, that's my opinion. As far as the Manson murders, it was so traumatic for them that they're probably trying to get some closure. A lot of times when your spirit is literally just ripped from you like that, you may not even realize that you have passed. There are a lot of times when investigators will go and speak with spirits. I've spoken with a few myself. I know that sounds a little odd, but it has happened. I personally have not tried to what they say cross folks over. In other words, get them to go from this plane of existence on to the next. A lot of people call it the veil into the light, whatever you want to call it. I'm not sure that as living humans, we have that ability or power to do that. To me, that's limited to the individual soul and God. But there have been people who have said, yes, we've crossed them over and they're no longer here. As a matter of fact, I was investigating a theater in Ventura Saturday night, and one of the investigators said, oh yeah, there was a little boy here, but we moved him on to his mother and we haven't seen him since. There's a little girl at the Queen Mary, Jackie, who is looking for her mother. And you can hear her call for her mother. So she may still be there because she still thinks her mother is on the ship somewhere. So we don't really know why and there's also something called a residual haunting, which is not, so we have intelligent hauntings and residual hauntings. An intelligent haunting would be what you would classify as an actual ghost, a thinking spirit. A residual is basically just an imprint. So it's not the soul of the person itself. It is just a psychic imprint that has been put in an area. And for those, we'll say a spirit who in life traveled from one area to another. So today you will actually see that spirit or haunting, say, walk from one door down a hall and into another room. And then the following night, you will see the exact same thing. And then the following night, the exact same thing. So it never changes. It's almost as if you're watching a video, rewinding, and then watching it over and over again. So there's no intelligence behind it. It's just a psychic imprint. I'm still kind of up in the air as far as the whole psychic thing, but I don't know how else to explain a residual haunting. So there are some that are here because they have unfinished business, some that are here because they don't realize that they are dead, some that are here because they just want to be remembered, and then there's others that are just imprints.
You just gave me an explanation of an experience I had some years ago on a plantation in Virginia. I was raised in California, and the little knowledge I had of plantations, and this was on the James River. So I was in the area. I'd been to Colonial Williamsburg, and so I decided to take this day trip to this plantation. because it was one that was supposed to be on the Underground Railroad. So upon approaching the visitor center, one of the employees came up to me and she said, "You're not from around here." And I stopped and I looked at her and I said, "No, I'm on a tour." She says, "You don't want to come here. You don't want to do this." And I said, "Yes, I do. I want to find out about Plantation." So I went in the little theater they had with a video, and then we had a tour of the house. And then they showed us areas like were behind the walls where they hid people and that sort of thing. Then after the tour of the house, we went down into the yard where they were reconstructing some of the slave quarters. Silly me, I walked in and I was overwhelmed with sadness. It was like someone threw a cloud on me or a blanket, and I turned to leave. And the little tour guide, she said, "Are you okay?" And I said, "No." I said, "I don't know what happened in there, but it was very uncomfortable. You just told me what happened to me." And yeah, it was a presence of sad people.
Yeah, and that that emotion could be so prevalent in that area that, and I believe that everybody has a little bit of psychic ability to be able to feel things around them. And there was probably so much sadness that your psychic ability was picking up on that. I tell people that I have about as much psychic ability as my tennis shoe. It might actually be a little less than my tennis shoe, but we had taken my daughter on her first investigation to the old Camarillo State Mental Hospital. And I've been investigating for so many years. I just, nothing seems to bother me as far as the ghosts and things like that. But we were in this room and it was a long dormitory at one point. So, there were like 15 or 20 people in there. And like I said, it was an insane asylum. It not completely, but they did have insane people there. And the area we were in was part of that. And the minute I walked in, I had a major panic attack. All I wanted to do was run, literally screaming from the area. And I'm sitting there going, whoa, what the heck is this? And I'm looking at my daughter, she's looking at me, and I'm like, okay, I got to hold it together for her, because I already knew she was a little bit nervous because she's not into the paranormal and stuff like that. So I managed to hold it together just long enough for my daughter and the rest of my team to, do a little investigation. Well, I'm literally sitting there shaking, sweating, and the minute I left the room, I was fine. And the only thing I could think of is that I was picking up on the panic and desperation of the people who were locked in there. Because that was their life. They were locked in this room with a bunch of other people, only let out, to get a little bit of fresh air here and there, and then put right back in there. So yeah, that it's very, very possible that's exactly what you were feeling, as you were picking up on the emotions of the people who had lived there.
Thank you.
Oh, my pleasure. One thing I had forgotten to mention with Ramon Navarro, his old house is actually haunted by Ramon, where he had been murdered. A lot of people would buy the house. It sold many times. A lot of people would buy the house specifically because it was haunted. The last people who bought the house didn't want it haunted, so they tore it down and rebuilt it. The problem is a lot of times when you tear down a haunted location, it makes the haunts more prevalent, because now they're like, wait, what are you doing to my house? And what there was a news anchor by the name of Connie Chung. I don't know if you guys remember her. They were doing a news broadcast from Ramon's old house. One of the crew went in to set up the cameras, came running out, would not go back in. Connie Chung went in there. They never did the broadcast from there because Ramon did not want them there. So that's one of the things that I kind of get a kick out of. Anyway, I'm sorry. It looked like you were about to. No. Oh. Okay.
No, I just thought that was fascinating.
Yeah.
That's crazy.
Yeah. The whole thing with Ramon, like I said, if you ever want to check into him, I highly recommend it. He was a definitely a special individual.
I was putting up a few of the images of the different locations, and I thought it was fascinating to see the architect. We're always like kind of interested not only in the history, but like the architecture and the physical placement of things, especially given the size of Los Angeles and where we are. And a lot of us are Los Angelinos or native Los Angeles folks. And just to be able to see the historical perspective, are there some particular places that you recommend that like we get familiar with or add to our 10-cent tour collection kind of thing?
Absolutely. The Millennium Biltmore Hotel in downtown Los Angeles. It has changed a little bit, but it still has the historic nature of it. And I'm sure pretty much most people are familiar with the Black Dahlia. That is the last place that Elizabeth Short was seen, was at the Millennium Biltmore. And as an FYI, in my Hollywood Obscura book, I write extensively about the Black Dahlia. And in there is who I believe the actual man who murdered her. All right. There's a lot of speculation that it was a man by the name of Hodel, but that was only because he hated his father. And then you have the Black Dahlia Avenger, and you have all these different theories on who the murderer is. When I was doing research for the book on the Black Dahlia, I came across a theory by an FBI profiler out of Quantico by the name of John Douglas, and a man by the name of Larry Harnish, who is a retired Los Angeles Times investigative reporter. And what they came up with is very hard to dismiss. The man was a surgeon. He lived nearby where the body was buried, or not buried, I'm sorry, dumped. Elizabeth Short's sister was married at his house. He had been having an affair, and his wife had kicked him out. And like the profiler said, the way the body was placed, it looked like a warning to the residents, and with his house being right there, a warning to his wife. And his office was right around the corner from the Biltmore Hotel, the last place that Elizabeth Short was ever seen. And it even goes into why he was probably never caught. He had been suffering from Alzheimer's and passed away a year after the murder. So, you know, there's a lot of things that when you look at it, you kind of go, oh, okay, yeah, this has to be the person. So
The puzzle pieces fit.
Yeah. Just thought I'd throw that out there.
Well, we're coming up at the close of our session. We want to thank everybody for joining us today. Brian, thank you. That was a great way to kick off the information. I want to make sure that everybody knows that this will be, we have 3 more in the series. Again, that's, we've got Alcatraz, Haunted Alcatraz, the Queen Mary, and then paranormal and its connection to religion. And I think a lot of people are going to be really interested in the connections, or how to make sense, how to make it make sense. So everyone, we thank you for joining us today. By the way, the Ollie catalog will be online later on today the physical catalog that you can download. You can email us at ollie@csudh.edu if you'd like to request a catalog or have any questions about membership or enrollment. And please visit our Ollie website, www.csudh.edu/Ollie, to see the course listing, to find out membership information, and get all the cool information. So thank you everybody for joining us today. I'll stay on the session for a moment more, but we'll end our recording now. And if anybody has any questions that they want to ask, feel free to do so. Thank you for joining everybody.